All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We'll give it another minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the Bidders Conference today to discuss the FY 2023 CoC program competition. My name is Camille Watney. I work with the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, and we're presenting the Bidders Conference today on behalf of the Baltimore City Continuum of Care, or CoC. I'm joined by my colleague Proma Nandi, who is a co-presenter, and we will go ahead and get started. A few housekeeping items. So this webinar is being recorded and will be shared later on the MOHS website under grant opportunities under the CoC competition. All attendees are currently muted, so please raise your hand or ask any questions in the chat or Q&A feature. That's on the Zoom toolbar. You can click and add a question there. Please note that the CoC has transitioned to a new email listserv. It's through Member 365. The link will be shared with the slides. It's also on the website as well. So if you have not done so already, please use this link to visit the website, sign up for the listserv, or visit the MOHS website to get the link. All updates about the CoC program competition, upcoming meetings, etc., are now channeled through here, and you have to opt in. You will not be transferred from the old listserv. As I mentioned, all application materials on the website, as well as key dates. All of the templates for the required application materials are there. And during this session today, we can certainly take your questions. We will only be receiving general questions about the application process and components. If you have any specific questions about your program or application or something specific to your organization, please email us at hspapplications@baltimorecity.gov. Okay, so we have a pretty packed agenda today. We'll be going over these following items. So kicking off with a welcome and overview. We'll be sharing some information about the timeline of the program competition, funding priorities, and program eligibility. Any changes from last year with the CoC competition? I know some of you are from organizations that have received funding in the past, so just flagging any differences in this year's process. The HUD policy priorities that guide and steer this application, more information about the applications, threshold requirements to ensure your application is complete, requirements for match, which we'll go into more detail about, tips on preparing budgets, de minimis and indirect cost rates, reminders, and then at the end we'll do a brief training and demo of the Neighborly portal. As opposed to emailing us all of the materials, we are requesting that you enter it into the new Neighborly grant portal that MOHS has adopted. This will make it cleaner, easier for everyone to ensure that your items have been received and you'll have a record that those have been submitted. And we'll go through what that looks like at the end, and then Q&A. Certainly feel free to drop your questions in the chat throughout. If it's something pressing, we could address it soon rather than later, but we do have time at the end to go over all the questions. Okay, so what is the CoC program competition? We have made effort to ensure that we're defining our acronyms throughout this presentation. There is a lot of terminology if you're newer to this process, so we're going to try to break that down during this webinar, but please ask questions if something is confusing. So this funding is through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, at the federal level. They launch a notice of funding opportunity. We reference this as NOFO for short, for the CoC, or Continuum of Care program competition. This is an annual funding competition. We will be submitting, as the Baltimore CoC, all of our application materials to HUD, but we run a local competition to determine which providers and agencies and projects the CoC is partnering with locally to then advance that via the federal competition. There's approximately 24 million annually for Baltimore City, and this process is directed by the Continuum of Care, which is a volunteer group of stakeholders, people with lived experience of homelessness, city officials, all dedicated to making sure that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring in Baltimore City. The submission from Baltimore City CoC to HUD has three parts. There is an application. This is a narrative put together by the CoC with support from MOHS. This is scored and ranked by HUD. We submit a project ranking of all projects that we are choosing to partner with. This is determined locally by the CoC and will be informed by this local application process that has kicked off. And then the project applications, which are submitted by applicants that have detailed information on each project. The timeline for the application process. So this shaded blue bar on this timeline, this is the local competition. This is the period we're in now. Materials were posted on July 26th, 2023 as a kickoff. And the application for providers in Baltimore City will close on August 21st, 2023. There's an application deadline of 5 p.m. in that Neighborly portal that I mentioned. August 2nd, this is the bidders conference that we're hosting now. You can see that the final deadline to HUD is at the end of September. We're aiming for a September 25th, 2023 submission to HUD. Between August 21st and September 25th, there are a lot of procedures and processes that have built in, some with strict time requirements dictated by HUD. Others are directed by the CoC. So in this period of after receiving the applications and before submitting the whole package to HUD, there's an evaluation process to score and rank new and renewal applications, to make sure that applications are complete, to determine which projects could be either fully or partially reallocated. And there's an appeals process that comes with that. And then the review that is done by the CoC of the final project ranking and application materials, all prior to the full package being submitted to HUD. I'm going to pass to Paroma to talk about funding priorities and project eligibility.
Thanks, Camille. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so within this year's competition, HUD releases an available funding amount that each community is eligible to apply for. So this chart describes that funding that Baltimore City is eligible for. So our annual renewal demand is also known as like all of the projects that are funded at this moment at this time in FY22. That is the amount of money that we are eligible to reapply for in our renewal funds. We've seen an increase due to FMR, but it is just over that 25.5 million that we are eligible to apply for in total. This also includes additional funding for bonus projects. So just under 1.8 million in the maximum amount of bonus funds that our CoC is eligible to apply for. So that means for any new project or expansion project, that's part of the pot of money we'll be looking for. We also have an opportunity to apply for DV, the domestic violence bonus project funding of just over $2 million. And again, these are for projects specifically that are going to be serving victims of domestic violence. And then this year we've seen an increase in our CoC planning grant funds that we will apply for, just about a 5% increase on that typical award. So just over that 1.2 million that the CoC will apply for in planning. And that's really to support the collaborative applicant, which is MOHS, in operating the continuum of care activities. So the total amount of funding available to us as a community is $30,806,210. So significant amount of money that's going to be available coming next year. Next slide. So one of the biggest questions that we get are how are CoC funds allocated? So our Continuum of Care Board provides oversight to the Resource Allocation Committee, also known as the RAC, on developing the strategies and decisions as follows. So the RAC reviews and approves our local competition, scoring, ranking criteria, and also reviews the final CoC competition application. They develop an annual reallocation strategy that's also approved by the CoC board. And they also oversee the work of the collaborative applicant, which is MOHS, in completing the application, which includes the project allocations with the review and rank. Next slide. So a little bit more about what MOHS, the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, responsibilities are as both a recipient of funds and as a collaborative applicant. And you'll hear that those terms a lot throughout, the CoC competition. The Continuum of Care has named MOHS as the collaborative applicant, but we're also the recipient of a significant portion of those CoC dollars. So both of those roles require certain responsibilities. So as a recipient, we participate in the CoC operations. We provide information for the grants inventory worksheet. We are responsible for understanding the grant agreement and the operation of project funds. We ensure all financial regulations are met for CoC funded projects, maintaining internal controls, maintain all required documentation for project applications, grant execution, grant closeout, and grant monitoring. We identify throughout the year the necessary grant amendments, and then also throughout the year conduct monitoring for project and financial operations. We prepare annual reporting and complete grant closeout requirements, and we also communicate with the HUD field office. So again, as a recipient, we have a lot of responsibilities, and we share these responsibilities with our nonprofit subrecipients or providers that are directly providing the services through the CoC grant. As a collaborative applicant, some of these roles are combined or very similar. And so we, facilitate that work with us, the recipient of those dollars, and the CoC. But we also work with BHSB, which is another recipient of CoC funds. So as a collaborative applicant, we'll work with them. We submit the grant inventory worksheet to HUD. We issue the local CoC competition. We prepare and submit the CoC consolidated application. So that's a 3-part application for this competition. We apply for grant funds from HUD on behalf of the CoC. We'll apply to receive the CoC program planning funds on behalf of the CoC. We'll work with the CoC to establish any written standards or updates to that. And then we provide basic technical assistance to the CoC funded projects on project operations. So again, there's a lot of different responsibilities, but that we work very closely with our Continuum of Care to uphold and to complete throughout this process. Next slide. And so then the collaboration here between the Resource Allocation Committee and our office. So again, the Resource Allocation Committee is responsible to oversee the submission process and MOHS throughout this process as a collaborative applicant, which was described a little bit earlier. And again, developing those strategies on the application process and how applications will be reviewed, approves the final submission, and then develops a communication plan to inform the CoC of the competition. And then MOHS facilitates the application process, receives applications in line with a directive from the Resource Allocation Committee, and then collects performance data to rate the renewal projects. And we prepare the 3-part submission of this application to HUD. Next slide. So we've also talked about reallocation. And what is that exactly? It's a way to shift funds in part or an entire amount from projects funded in the last cycle of FY22 to new projects that apply in this cycle of FY23. Reallocation can only occur during the competition. So it's a part of the process that HUD emphasizes and is reviewed, and when HUD is awarding any community with new funding or bonus funding, they'll first look to see if communities have reallocated funds to fund their own new projects. So again, the Resource Allocation Committee comes with develops that strategy that's board approved and is detailed in our request for proposals on what the board is looking for. But ultimately, reallocation is based off underspending, underperforming, monitoring or compliance issues, and overall how the project is performing. So again, there's a number of different criteria that's reviewed in determining whether a project is at risk for reallocation, whether that's in part or for the entire project. Next slide. So again, a little bit more details into the actual ranking of the CoC project. So again, there's a 3-part application, and one part of it is called our priority ranking. So HUD requires all communities to rank each of their projects from a scale, and they will fall under tier 1 or tier 2. And so in each application year, in each notice of funding opportunity, HUD will indicate what % of your annual renewal demand will fall under tier 1. Tier 1 is determined by our local rank of projects. So based off the Resource Allocations Committee's review of all renewal projects, high performing projects will rank first, and there's a strategy again outlined in the RFP guidance that provides more detailed on that ranking. But projects with a combined dollar amount of 22 million will fall under tier 1. Tier 2 happens to be about 6% of our total annual renewal demand of just over 1.6 million. And what does it mean to be in tier 2? So that means it's scored by HUD according to federal funding priorities, and all projects in tier 2 compete nationally for funding. So when we think of tier 1, we kind of always think, oh, these projects are safe from being cut by HUD. And tier 2, there's a little bit more risk because we're competing nationally for this funding. To be honest, no project is really safe. We have to ensure that we're still meeting the high performing standards for our community for all of our projects, regardless if they fall in tier 1 or tier 2. But the tier 2 projects are under a little bit more scrutiny by HUD. And then we have YHDP here. You'll see, like, if you were to do this math, YHDP is projects are kept separate for this year, according to our notice of funding from HUD. The YHDP funds that were awarded to us in round 3 are still considered non-competitive. And so YHDP applicants still need to apply for funding this year, but they aren't scored or ranked like the rest of the projects. They are going to be renewed non-competitively, and so they aren't technically part of tier 1 or tier 2. So they're just in a separate pot. But again, YHDP projects do need to reapply for that funding. Next slide. Okay, so some of the details of project eligibility. So this chart here provides information on the project type, the description, the target population, whether it's eligible for renewal funding, bonus funding, or DV bonus. And again, this is all pulled from our notice of funding opportunity from HUD that was released in July. So permanent supportive housing, that's permanent rental assistance and support services, can be site-based or scattered site. This is permanent housing project. It means permanent housing subsidies and support services for as long as a household needs them. The target population for this, it is chronically homeless with, and they must have a disability. Renewal projects are allowed, and then bonus funding is allowed for both new projects or expansion projects, but no DV bonus funds for this project type. Rapid rehousing is our other permanent housing intervention. However, this is a short to medium term rental assistance and support services. So under 24 months of support services and housing subsidies. It's only for scattered site housing locations. Target population is for anyone who meets the definitions, the HUD definitions of homelessness. Renewing projects are allowed for this funding, and bonus funds are allowed and expand for new and expansion projects. And this is eligible for DV bonus funds for new and expansion projects. The next project type here is transitional housing. So this is, again, is not a permanent housing intervention. It's up to 2 years of support services and shelter services. The target populations are typically special populations, so youth, victims of domestic violence or trafficking, and this is only eligible for renewal projects at this time, so no bonus funds or DV funds eligible. Next slide. Okay, so this is the second one is a joint transitional housing, which is rapid rehousing, which is transitional housing and rapid rehousing combined. This is a newer project type in the last couple of years. Our community does not have a project like this here in Baltimore, but there are examples across the country where other CoCs have adopted this project type. And this is a way for HUD to reintroduce transitional housing, but to have this as a permanent housing project. So it's a combination of having transitional housing coupled with rapid rehousing options for permanent housing. And again, there's a target population here for youth, victims of domestic violence and trafficking. And so renewals are allowed. However, that's not something our community will be applying for since we don't have a project, but this is an eligible project type for bonus funds or DV bonus funds. So again, if you're interested in applying for this type of project, really encourage you to look at other CoCs that have adopted a joint project to look at best practices as you apply for something like this. Support services only. We have a couple support services only projects. You'll note that these are only allowed for renewal, no bonus funds for either. No bonus funds are allowed for any of these projects in the normal bonus or the DB bonus. So we do have a street outreach project. We have 2 coordinated entry projects under this as well. But again, these are only eligible for renewals. And then we have our HMIS project. Again, this is also only eligible for renewal and not applicable at this time for the DB bonus or bonus funds. And the lead agency here in Baltimore is the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services. So again, we'll reapply for those funds. Next slide. Oh, and sorry, could you go back really quickly? So one thing that was left out of the slide deck, and we'll just add it to the FAQ at the end. We do have one safe haven project that is also eligible for renewal. It's a direct grant of BHSB's. Again, the safe haven project is to support low barrier entry into a safe haven shelter. And again, it's only eligible for renewal, not eligible for new project funds at all, or expansion funds at this point. So just wanted to make a note of that is a project type you may see on our grants inventory worksheet. Next slide. I'm going to pass it back to Camille for changes.
Great, thank you. So this is just a graph showing the change in funding over the course of the past few years. So 2019, 2020, and 2021. You can see the total amounts on the right-hand side have increased slightly. And then the different colored bars on the bar chart you can see are for each project type. So as a reminder, SSO is support services only, TH transitional housing, HMIS is the data management system, safe haven project, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and planning dollars. So you can see that the amount going to PSH is consistently the highest out of all the project types, followed by rapid rehousing. Those 2 project types are viewed as permanent housing solutions, and that's the bulk of the CoC funds, and then smaller awards within the other project types. We wanted to flag a few changes from last year. Some of these are changes that were triggered by HUD and the NOFO from HUD at the federal level, and some are local changes occurring here in Baltimore City. So if you want to review the full text of these first few, they're included in the RFP, or request for proposal and guidelines document, on the MOHS website. I encourage everyone to read those thoroughly to see more information about this application process, or in the HUD NOFO. There's additional language on all of these. Just to go over a few highlights here. So YHGP, or Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, there's an opportunity for renewal applicants to request new special activities through this renewal application process. The full list is included in the NOFO. The CoC planning increase, HUD basically increased the amount of funding available in planning dollars. This is basically a single project and an allocation of funding to help coordinate and implement the CoC program. So there's an increase to that available pot of money. There's a few new eligible CoC activities that were included by HUD. This is related to VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act. It's mainly surrounding the facilitation and coordination of activities to ensure compliance with emergency transfer plans and ability to monitor compliance with confidentiality protections. And this was included as a budget category this year. There was also from HUD an amendment to the criteria for individuals who qualify as homeless. You can see the full text of that in the NOFO. These last three items are local changes. So as I mentioned at the start of this, there's a new submission process for all application materials, as opposed to emailing items to HSP applications at Baltimore City. There's a new neighborly grant portal for a document upload. I'm going to demo that at the end of this webinar today. There's one deadline for all project types. If you applied last year, it was a staggered deadline. This is just one deadline, August 21st at 5 p.m. for all project types, whether that's new, renewal, or expansion or replacement. And another site change, agencies who are applying for expansion projects, you only need to complete the new application and renewal application. There's no separate third expansion application. I'm passing it back to Proma to speak about HUD policy priorities.
Thanks. So we continue to see the similar policy priorities by HUD that are also aligned with the city's policy priorities. So increasing the supply of affordable housing, using a housing first approach. This has been emphasized in this year's NOFO in evaluating projects applying for renewal funding to ensure that they're operating using a housing first approach, reducing unsheltered homelessness, improving system performance, partnering with both housing, health, and service agencies, advancing race equity, engaging persons with lived experience of homelessness, improving assistance to LGBTQ+ individuals, and ultimately ending homelessness for all. So again, these policy priorities have not changed much from the previous year's NOFO, and again, are aligned with the work that the Baltimore City CoC and Mayor's Office of Homeless Services is also working on. So not many changes here. So I'll go over the project applications, and then we'll go over the slides, and then we'll stop sharing the presentation. I'll pull up each of the applications just to view quickly. Next slide. So again, the application requirements, there's a checklist on your application. Really important, as you can see, this slide is text heavy. There is a lot of things that go into this application. Renewing agencies, you know this, new agencies that are thinking of applying for funding, take a look at these requirements. Make sure you start collecting them early, and I'm speaking to both renewing and new agencies applying for these funds. This process takes longer than most people think, and so it's really important that you get all this documentation together because the deadline, is quickly approaching, and we want to see complete applications received before on August 21st. So again, obviously the most important thing is having the actual completed application with budget, and again, ensuring that you're using the correct application with the correct, the budget documentation. All of that information can be found on our website. So again, you're not putting your own proposal together, we want you to use the templates that we've created for the applications for both the renewing new and new projects, and those can be found on the website. We want to see that you have an active SAM registration. This should be coupled with your unique entity identifier, the UEI. This is a newer in the last couple of years as well. We've moved away from the DUNS number, so agencies need to have a valid unique entity identifier to apply. So that's something that you also want to make sure your agency has updated. We want to see your federal tax exemption determination letter, so the 501c3 paperwork. Match documentation. We need to see commitments at the beginning of the application. Camille will talk about a little bit more what match means, and then we'll talk about that process a little bit more later on in this presentation. Again, there are templates on how to develop your match documentation, so please use those. Sign conflict of interest questionnaire, fair housing policy and statement agreement, and housing first certification. Again, those 3 documents can also be found on our website. You need to review those, sign them, and attach them to your application. We need to see your certificate of good standing from the state of Maryland. This should be either a certificate should be submitted that's within 30 days of the date of the application due date. We don't require you to get a new certificate. So if you already have a certificate of good standing, we will accept a screen print showing that it's still active. We need your list of board of directors, an organizational chart, proof of ownership or lease only for site-based housing projects, so only if that's applicable for you. We need to see your financial audits, so a single audit for any organization receiving over $750,000 in federal funds, or your independent financial audits, and we need those for the last 2 years. For renewal agencies, we need to see your program policies that includes and specifically specify the termination, non-discrimination, and grievance policies, and your program policies related to participation and rights and responsibilities. And then for new projects, we need to have your articles of incorporation and bylaws. And then if you're a renewing agency and there's been an update to your bylaws, please update those, send those over to us as well. And then for, again, new agencies, we also need to have your 501c3 paperwork. If you have questions on the requirements, please reach out to us early so we can answer those questions in more detail. But again, this checklist is part of your application, and I can't stress this enough. Please review this and make sure you submit your application with these completed documents. Next slide. Okay, so for the renewal project applications, the application is again posted on the website. You're going to also want to pull the latest grants inventory worksheet for 2023. And so on that grants inventory worksheet, you'll see the list of all of the agencies and projects. You'll want to filter out to look at yours and ensure that you're matching your budget exactly to what it looks like in the GIW. So what's available for rental assistance, what's available for support services, etc. That's what you will be applying for. You cannot request a change during the competition. If you are looking to amend your grant, that's something, please to communicate that with your program compliance officer, because that will be something that we'll look at for your current grant and not this grant that we're applying for. So again, just to clarify that, if you're looking to amend your agency's budget, that should be communicated to your program compliance officer, but should not be included in this renewing project application, because we cannot change your budget for FY23 since we're still applying for those funds. So within each budget category, you can request the desired funding in each eligible line item, but again, it needs to match those component types. So for rental assistance, support services, it cannot exceed what you have already been receiving, and that is all listed in the GIW. And maybe I'll pull that up too, just so folks can see. And then please note that you'll be applying for the full admin amount, but at contracting, MOHS does split this with you at 50-50. So we apply for the full amount that's available on the GIW, but because MOHS is the recipient of these funds, we do take half of the admin to support the monitoring and administrative functions it takes to manage these dollars. So just note that that happens at the contracting stage, but not at the application stage. Okay, next slide. For new and expansion projects, again, as Camille mentioned, if you're applying for an expansion, that means you already have a renewing project. You need to apply for the renewal and apply for a new and expansion project within one application. So the reason why HUD requires us to do this is that your renewing project will be ranked, and then your expansion project will be ranked. And this is to ensure that your renewing project still gets renewed, and that your expansion project, again, that gets evaluated nationally. And so if it succeeds, then it gets combined with your renewing project. But if it doesn't, your renewing project is still considered, safe and renewed, hopefully. So that's why you have to do 2 applications there. And then for new projects altogether, again, you're gonna projects will work with you to adjust budgets if necessary, based off what funding is available. But keep in mind what we listed as bonus dollars for both the bonus and then the DV bonus. So if you're applying for DV bonus, or if your project is specifically serving folks with that are surviving domestic violence, then again, there's that pot of money to look at. But if you're if it's all around just project serving category 1 homelessness, then you need to take a look at what available funding we have in bonus dollars. You just don't want to exceed that. That's the best way I could put that. We don't put a cap on your project applications on how much you can request, but it's kind of a good mindset to look at what's available within our community to develop that budget. Your budget should list the number of households you plan to serve and the staff needed. And then any rental assistance, you'll complete that part of the application as well. Again, for expansion projects, you need to think of how you're adding services or units. And the idea is we would like to be able to see an increase in the number of clients served. So again, ensure that you enter that information based off what your expectations are for an expansion project. And again, I'll pull up those applications so we can talk about that in a little bit more detail. Yeah, the next slide is just for YHDB renewal and replacement applications. Again, as I mentioned before, these are non-competitive this year for our community, but these folks are still required to apply, and you can apply as a renewal project or a replacement project. And a replacement project really means that there are some special activities that are eligible for specifically YHDP projects. You can look at that list of special activities and see if any of those activities your agency wants to adopt within your for your program that you believe will serve your clients well, and ensure that they are able to move to permanent housing, that they have stability. We should note that the replacement activities must be approved by the Youth Action Board, and but that is something we'll work on after, after anything gets approved. So right now, MOHS at this point is coordinating, or will be coordinating very soon, with the Youth Action Board to approve special activities for the FY22 grants, and any proposed activities for FY23. So just something to keep in mind, but it shouldn't hinder you from, looking at those replacement activities, that additional step. And then there is a supplemental questionnaire that's going to be required for all FY23 YHDP project applications that is not yet available, but will be available by the end of this week. And we will email you directly to let you know where that is and how to complete it. But it's it'll be a pretty simple questionnaire, mainly with yes, no questions. And the reason we have a supplemental questionnaire is HUD just released their applications earlier this week. And so there's a couple of things that we didn't have before we released our local application. So again, just something to keep in mind for the few agencies that will be receiving YHDP funds. Okay, so Camille, if you want to just pause, I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to pull up my screen in a second. All right, so Camille, can you confirm that you can see my screen? Okay, cool. And I'm going to just try to make it a little bit bigger. And I'm not going to go through every question. I'm just going to provide a general overview of these project applications. So right now we're looking at the renewal project. It is an Excel document. So I apologize for folks that don't love Excel, but it's an Excel document. The first tab, there's multiple tabs here. So make sure you complete all 6 tabs. There's basic information. So again, basic information about your project, the name, your contact information. And then it's going to ask you a couple questions about your application. You want to complete it. There isn't a character limit here, but try to be concise. We don't need pages of information here. And again, some of this is should be a quick yes or no, and if not, describe any changes. So again, there are three questions there that you want to make sure you complete. Then there is there's some more descriptive questions here, and this is related to those HUD policies and priorities. We don't have questions on each of those priorities, but we have some general questions on all of, describe how your project includes these policy priorities. Again, we don't have character limit, but we are not looking for pages and pages of description here. We just want something concise here. And then we have some more details on how your project is addressing racial equity and how your project is addressing the needs of the LGBTQ+ community here. So again, these are supplemental questions to help our resource allocation committee review your renewal project. The budget details here, again, we want to pull up the grants inventory worksheet, and you'll see, I think I just changed it on mine, but on here you'll see like the FY22. It's really the FY23. It's whatever is what we have posted on our website, and I'll pull that. It's the most recent grants inventory worksheet that you should be looking at, and you'll fill it out again. If you're a leasing project, you'll fill it out here. Rental assistance here. So like, again, a lot of this is, there should be, calculations there. So it should automatically calculate for you. You want to The grayed out areas are things that you will not, not complete, but the cells that do not have a shading to it, those are things that you can add on to. You don't have to, but again, based off your application, you'll add items there. Support services, you'll see we want to see there's a description here. So again, we need to see that detailed description of what the activity is, and the full detailed description. So again, if it's personnel, it should be a little bit more detailed than just personnel. We want to know how many full-time staff, how many part-time staff, things like that. We want to have detailed there. If it's assistance with moving, again, it says the example, moving trucks and movers, but we want to know, how many clients you're going to be serving and things like that. And again, there's some unit descriptions there, so that will help with your description, but as detailed as you can be with your support services area. And please do not add things. These are eligible project activities. So again, you'll complete this as needed for your project, and it goes down. And it will automatically calculate if your project has operating costs, you'll have operating here. And then it has a whole tab for personnel. So again, we need to see the name of a staff person, the job title, all of this in detail, because this does help build your budget for your contracts later on. And then your match documentation, you will fill it out here, but we also need to see an attachment, which is going to be on your agency letterhead, indicating the match amount that should match whatever you've listed on your renewal application. And again, the budget summary here, this will automatically calculate, but you'll also have an opportunity to indicate whether you have an indirect cost rate, or if your project plans to use the 10% de minimis rate. And just know, if you are using the 10% de minimis rate, you're required to submit your supporting documentation. Also with your indirect cost rate, we'll need to see that approved paperwork as well. For that to get included. And again, I think this is just a typo too. Sorry, it should be the FY23 grants inventory worksheet. We'll make sure to put that in the FAQ to make sure people are using the correct grants inventory worksheet. Let me stop sharing really quickly. I'm going to actually pull up our website. Okay. Share again. Okay, so here, I just pulled up our website. So again, if you go to MOHS, you'll see grant opportunities, Continuum of Care, and then you can go to our competition page. All of our information is detailed here. So everything you need will be posted here. And the grants inventory worksheet that I've been talking about, constantly talking about, it's right here. So pull that up. It's going to be an Excel document. Sorry. So if you pull that up, this is what you see. It's the grants inventory worksheet. So you'll see all of the projects here that are eligible for renewal. If you don't see your information here and you believe you're eligible for a renewal project, you should contact us immediately. But we, as the collaborative applicant, the recipient of funds and the collaborative applicant, we did review this really carefully to ensure that all of our projects were included. But again, let us know if there's something you think we've missed. or something that doesn't look right, but you could filter your agency out and you'll, look at, again, how much you're receiving in rental assistance, support services, and admin dollars, whether you're using actual rent or FMR, which is a fair market rent, how many bedrooms you're serving or are proposed to serve, and then the total amount that you're requesting. So again, this total ARA, that's what you should be requesting as a renewal project. It cannot exceed that. These activity component parts cannot exceed. So if you're receiving, 38,954 in admin, you cannot ask for more or less. That's what you have to ask for. Same for the support services and the rental assistance. Again, those items can't change. If you need to adjust those line items within that budget, you can do so. If you're serving 44 units or propose to serve 44 one-bedroom units, that's what you need to apply for. If your agency is actually doing something different, you should let us know that, because we do need to adjust that, but we cannot, like, the amount that you receive can't change. So say you're serving, you have some 2 bedrooms in there, and so you've reduced the number of 1 bedrooms, but you're only still receiving that 482. That's possible. But if that's the case, you do need to let us know that in that renewal application. So again, it should match. We understand if there is some nuances within the unit sizes based off your households that you're serving. But again, just let us know exactly what you're requesting if it looks different from the grants inventory worksheet. And again, if you have some, question about that, please email that to us ahead of time. But again, this is what that grants inventory worksheet looks like. You can find it on our website along with the application. This is the renewal application, so you'll see that here. Next, I'll review the YHDP application. I have that pulled up right here. Let me close this. Sorry about that. So again, you'll see the application is very similar, basic info. These questions are a little bit different. They're related to your YHDP projects. And that's for replacement if you're applying for that. There's some information about the budgets. Same goes for YHDP projects. Can't request things that are different based off your proposal here. And then if you are applying for YHD replacement activities, look through these activities, and then you just want to check yes or no. And then again, we'll have maybe some supplemental questions for you based off the activities you select, because some of these will require an additional attachment to HUD. But again, we'll work with those agencies on that, and it shouldn't hinder you from applying for replacement activities because these are flexibilities within our funding that are meant to, support youth more effectively. Salary breakdown, again, is very similar. We need to know the staff, their titles, and all the details on what the cost that you're charging them to. And same goes for the match amount. We need to see the source match or the information about match here, but we also need to have those commitment letters submitted within the portal. And then this again is the budget summary that automatically will get filled, but you will indicate here if you have any indirect cost rates. So that's the YHDP project. And then now for the new and expansion project, this is a Word document. It's pretty lengthy, it's 26 pages. But again, it has, because there's not logic built into this, there's questions here based off your application, you'll answer, and some things you won't need to answer. And so again, one of the big things this year is that you need to have your unique entity ID number instead of a DUNS number. So don't just copy and paste from previous years. Make sure you have that information correctly. We want to see your contact information and then sign off on whoever's authorizing this project. There are a number of questions here that you need to fill out. I'm not going to go through all of this. Here, you want to look at these questions. If you're applying for PSH, you're going to fill out this section. You won't fill out this section. So again, this is something that I just want to specify. You can only use this application for one application. If you are an agency that's going to apply for two projects, so like you're applying for a permanent supportive housing project and a rapid rehousing project, you need to submit two applications. You cannot just check off these two boxes. So that's just, I just want to clarify that. If you have questions on that, again, please reach out to us ahead of time. But again, if you are applying for PSH, you're going to fill out this section. You don't need to fill out the next. If you're filling out for rapid rehousing, you won't fill out the PSH portion. You'll see the questions are almost exactly the same, just based off your project type. This is specifically for the joint component. There's a couple additional questions here for that project type. This is all the same questions for any project type. So you want to make sure, again, there are character limits here. Please do not exceed those. It's your experience as an applicant. This is where you're going to talk about your project or in the project description. And again, some of these are yes, no responses. And yeah, I'm just sorry, I'm not going to scroll through all of this. Here, you need to complete this chart. Again, these have drop-down boxes, so use those when available. Again, this is our local competition review. Again, these are similar questions that we have on our renewal projects. This section is just for expansion projects. So again, if you're a new project and not a renewing project applying for an expansion project, you do not need to complete this section. But if you are an agency applying for an expansion, then you need to complete the above section of the new project and this section. Just to know, if you are a renewing agency and applying for additional funding, you could also just apply for a new project. You don't have to say you're expanding your project. Just want to, there are benefits to doing one or the other. And if you have questions on that, you can reach out to us as well. Everybody needs to complete the first operating year project work plan, project staffing, and then the funding request again here. This is developing that budget of yours. Again, this is just everything that's in our Excel document for renewal projects is just in this Word document. Same for the match funds here. It needs to be a commitment letter needs to be submitted as well with that. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. And I think I'm going to pass it back to you, Camille.
Okay, great. I'm just gonna reshare. Okay, great. So the way the review process works is that the initial pass at all applications include a threshold review. This is basically an assessment to make sure that the application includes all required components. So in addition to being that in addition to the organization being a nonprofit provider, that the project is serving the specific population outlined in the NOFO and regulations. There's a few key components that we look at. So a demonstration of financial and managerial capacity and experience to carry out the project that you're proposing, capacity to administer funds, capacity to serve the population outlined, participate in coordinated entry, which is a standardized process and system to match individuals to housing in the city, or a commitment to participate if you're a new project. A housing first approach. This means that there's no specific requirements for individuals in order to access housing, like case management or sobriety. The match minimum must be met, cost must be reasonable, and the project must be financially feasible. There's also requirements for match. This has been spoken about a few times throughout this presentation. So if you're unfamiliar with match, this is basically a requirement to have the project not solely be funded and supported through the CoC grant, but that there are other external commitments, either cash or in kind, of resources that are contributed to the grant activities. So all projects must be able to demonstrate that this match exists and has already been established with either a partner organization or internally. The match must be for eligible activities under the CoC program and equal 25% or more of the award amount, excluding leasing. I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. This can be from a public or private source. And then if awarded, the match must be documented on a monthly basis through expenditure reports at your agency and be able to be audited and verified that that match was as described in the letter at the outset. There are templates provided in the application package, so please view those and use those in writing the letters. The program income from this program that you're implementing can be used as match, and this can be indicated in your application. In-kind contributions can include the value of real property, equipment, goods, or services. So for example, the building that you're operating the program out of. And just a note that in-kind match provided by a third party must be documented with an MOU or a memorandum of understanding to formalize the relationship with that third party. I'm not going to read this out exactly, but these are some examples of eligible match categories. I'll just pause for a moment. Okay. This is an example of how to calculate match. So the example on the left, this is a budget that does not include leasing. So you can see there's rental assistance funding, support services. There's an admin here of 7%. And so the total here is 107,000. The 25% match requirement is calculated off of that total amount. On the right, this is a sample, very bare bones overview budget with leasing. Here you can see in italics, there's 80,000 of the budget has been dedicated to leasing, 20 to supportive services, 7% of admin, and the total amount requested here is also 107, but the portion from which you're calculating the match is only 27,000. This is excluding the leasing. So you'd be calculating 25% match minimum requirement off of 27,000 instead of 107. I'm going to pass it to Proma to share a bit about the budgets.
Thanks. And again, this chart really provides some detail on what the component types of each project you're eligible to apply for. and I thought I took this out, sorry. But the MOHS for the admin, we will not automatically add this to your budget. You need to add it because it's going to affect how much match you add. And so you need to calculate it using 10% of the admin. And I believe just looking at the applications that it indicates that you need to calculate it that way. Sorry about that. Yeah, it just says calculate by adding all the budget line items and multiplying by 10%. So again, we just want you to make sure that, again, we'll put that in the FAQ. You need to add your admin in as a new project, and that should be 10% of the total request of funds. And that's part of your to calculate the match. So we don't want to do that for you and have you make an error on your match documentation. So again, PSH is eligible for leasing. If you're applying for leasing, you cannot apply for leasing and rental assistance. It needs to be one or the other. With leasing, you can apply for operating costs. So you'll see if you're applying for rental assistance, you cannot apply for operating costs. And then that same goes for rapid rehousing. If it's only eligible for rental assistance, so no operating costs there. All of these projects are eligible for support services, HMIS and admin. And then again, if there are questions relating to how you calculate your admin, or if you can apply for this activity under this project type, please go ahead and ask us those questions. Yeah, that's we can go to the next slide. So again, just a couple reminders. I think we talked about this already. List of staff members must be included, the name and titles for renewal applicants. Ensure you calculate things correctly. There are formulas already in the sheets. Do not add sections to your budget categories. Just understanding fair market rent versus actual rent. This only applies really to renewal projects. Any new project applying for funding will automatically need to apply for fair market rent. And that's based off the fair market rent for our community here in Baltimore City. It's already listed, the amounts are already listed in the application, so you don't need to look for that. If you're on the grants inventory worksheet, if it indicates that your agency is receiving actual rent, it just means that it cannot go, it's calculated at a different level based off the actual rent you're paying out for your units. This typically goes up every year as well. So if you have a hard time calculating it or needs have questions about how you calculate this, please reach out to us. But again, that is indicated on your grants inventory worksheet. If you're a project that's applying that has actual rent, you cannot request fair market rent at this point. Again, the fair market rent calculators for FY23. And I already mentioned the actual rent is calculated based off the units already assigned and how much you're paying for those units. Okay, so next slide. I'm going to pass it back to Camille.
So I'll share a bit of information on de minimis or indirect rates. So indirect versus direct costs, roughly direct costs are attributable to specific cost objects and categories, and these tend to be variable. So for example, something very specific for the program, such as leasing or case management. Indirect costs are non-attributable, so usually includes things like overhead or administrative activities, and these tend to be non-variable. So they're occurring in the short term, whether an activity happens or not. Something like the management and oversight of the program or rent or overhead. There is an opportunity to use an indirect cost rate. So your two choices are in your budget. If your agency has a federally negotiated rate from your agency that's already been established, you can use that. If you choose to use a 10% de minimis rate, You can include this in your budget, but you must share a cost allocation plan with MOHS as part of your application. If you request the 10% rate of indirect, but don't provide the cost allocation plan, we will follow up with you to complete that as soon as possible in order for your application to be complete. The expenses must be tracked in a general ledger. There needs to be a commitment to basic accounting principles. There has to be an accounting for any prohibiting or disqualifying considerations, and understanding that the compliance team will verify adherence. But you can include indirect just with one of these avenues. Proma, this is back to you.
Thanks. So again, I think Camille is going to talk about Neighborly, and we'll just be mindful of time as well. So again, we'll be submitting applications through Neighborly this year. Please use standard naming conventions for files, such as this is an example for MOHS, but if it's an agency, it's going to be your agency name, your project name, and then your MD number, your grant number, and exactly what the document is. So carefully review this information on the MOHS website and the notice of funding opportunity from HUD. Again, our application question inbox is hspapplications@baltimorecity.gov, and we encourage you to ask questions early on. And then just another quick reminder for renewing agencies, we just wanted to put this in the slide deck since we knew that many of you would be watching this. A quick reminder that FY22 grant agreements are underway with HUD. Some agencies have already received their executed contracts. As part of the grant agreement with HUD, MOHS has been advised that we need to update all match documents with full FY22 grant numbers. So this past spring, we had been in touch with everybody about match. We will be in touch with you again to update this information. So again, if we reach out to you, this is most likely in relation to your FY22 grant and not your FY23 application. Just wanted to clarify that here. And then if you have current questions on your current contract or expenditure reports, please review that with your program compliance officer. All right, thanks, Camille.
All right, the last thing we're going to go over, and I won't go into tremendous depth here, but is I'm just going to show the Neighborly grant portal, just so you can get a sense of what that looks like. One moment. Okay, it'll look slightly different on your side, but there's going to be a link posted later today on the MOHS page to Neighborly. This is a new platform that we're using for grant submissions. There's going to be an option to start a new application. From here, there's only a few pages. There's going to be a few questions at the outset, and the bulk of this is actually required documents. This is not duplicative from the application. This is just information at the outset. Here, I'm not going to take time to complete all of these components, but you put in just basic information, address, UAI number. We are requiring a primary contact and a secondary contact for your agency to make sure that we're able to contact you. And if someone is on vacation, there's a backup. Once that's completed, you're able to go here to required documents. These are the components of the application that are required, and you'll just be able to upload the files. The ones that are starred in red are required components. And then there's additional options here, depending on the type of application that you're submitting. So agency policy and procedures, letters of support, etc. And then once all of those are uploaded, you will complete and continue. There's a few last questions about housing first policies and confidentiality. And then once you submit it through here, you'll receive verification. We do encourage you to save all documents locally, but they will be submitted and reviewed by MOHS and the RAC and the CoC, as opposed to emailing documents. We know there's been issues in the past with large files not being able to be communicated via email. So we're hoping this is more streamlined and smoother going forward. Otherwise, we are at the portion of the presentation with Q&A. So I see there's a few questions that have already come in. I'll reshare the screen, but Prema, do you want to start combing through some of this?
And I just wanted to also add, Camille, can you clarify with the Neighborly portal, folks could start filling that in without actually submitting the application? So again, once it's available on our website later today, we really do encourage people to register for Neighborly so they can start entering that information in. And that way, if you do have any troubleshooting issues, that we can work with our lead at Neighborly to help address those. We realize that this is a new system we're rolling out for this competition, but we do want it to, we do want it to work for our community members, our CoC members. And again, this is hopefully going to be easier for folks than submitting large files through email. We've been told that the file size doesn't matter, so you can upload large files, although please don't upload too much of unnecessary things, just the requirements. So one of the first questions are these policy priorities which are referred to in step 1 on HUD priorities tab of the renewal application? So I think just to clarify that question, Camille, do you mind flipping through the slide deck to that policy priorities? So this is what we're referring to for that question in the renewal application tab, the policy priorities. So yeah, we want to know how your agency is using these policy priorities, be specific, concise, but we don't need a paragraph on all of these. Again, this is just to help our resource allocation committee get a better sense of your project, the renewal project application, and how it's aligned with this work. Hopefully that answers your question. And again, we'll type out these questions for a FAQ document on the website too.
And Prema, just a note, I'm gonna type some of the answers for some of the questions.
Perfect. Yeah. And then I realize we're like 6 minutes out. I think we're gonna stay on a little bit longer, but if folks have to drop, just know that this is being recorded and will be posted to the website later as well. So the second question here is, can you please advise on the difference between renewal and replacement applications for the YHDP grant? So again, the renewing application is just to renew the current YHDP project and the current budget activities already assigned in your FY22 grant agreement. If you are applying for any of those special activities this year, that would be a replacement. So it doesn't mean that you're doing, like, your scope of work has changed significantly. It's just applying for those special activities. Hopefully that answers that question. But again, if you have more questions on that, please reach out. And then what do you mean by supporting documentation for indirect cost? So there's, depending on whether you have a NICRA letter, we need the that paperwork indicating that you have an approved indirect cost rate to include in your award. And then if you are applying for the de minimis rate, which is 10%, we need a cost allocation plan. So I don't think we have time to go over that in detail, but if you need more information on that, we can definitely pass that on your way, like pass it on to agencies. We can also put something on our website in the FAQs. There's a question here, or more of a statement. Requirements for the de minimis rate are counter to the 2 CFR 200 guidance. I'm not exactly sure what that is in reference to. If you're indicating that the supporting documentation is counter to 2 CFR 200 guidance, we're not saying that you have to provide supporting documentation if you're receiving the 10% de minimis rate, which is the reason why you would receive that 10% de minimis rate. You do not have to provide supporting documentation, but your agency is required to be able to document how you are using that indirect cost rate, and that will be, it can be monitored. So we're happy to explore that with anyone that's requesting the de minimis rate further, but yeah, hopefully that answers that question. Is there any guidance for the amount of money organizations can request? Camille, do you mind going to that chart of the ARD? I think if you go further to the full. Sorry, I think it's at the beginning. Oh, I think you just, yeah, there we go. Okay, so if you're a new agency applying for new money, you'll see here that we have just over 1.7 million in bonus dollars, and then just over 2 million in DV bonus dollars. So again, I would suggest staying under that range, depending on how much money the Resource Allocation Committee determines to reallocate this year. The amount that can go to new project funding may increase, but definitely recommend staying within these limits, knowing that you may not be the only agency applying for bonus funding. But other than that, there is not a cap. But as Camille also indicated, we're looking for sound applications that are financially feasible and make sense. So, that the requests for housing supports are also, aligned with the support services and admin costs and any additional costs. So that's, if you want more details, you can ask us some specific questions about your project. And we may be able to provide you some more guidance, but again, trying to, stay within what's available in bonus and DV bonus is my best recommendation. The 25% match request amount, is that listed on the grants inventory worksheet, including the 50% of admin costs that goes to MOHS? No, it is not listed on the grants inventory worksheet. You need to do that math on your own. But if you have questions on it, please ask us. Again, the full project admin should be included when calculating your match, even though your agency is not receiving that full match amount. There's some cost sharing eligibilities built into the CoC regulations that allows the recipient to receive half of those funds, but the subrecipient is still required to submit 25% match on that project. I think.
Did I might have missed it. Sorry, I was typing. Did we address the renewal and replacement applications for YHDP?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, sorry.
And I can fill in that in a second. Oh, and then okay, I think you've answered some in the chat, but I'll just repeat them. Here, can multiple individuals register for Neighborly and work on the same application? And Camille has answered that question. You need to complete and submit the application only one time from one authorized user who is able to sign and certify the submission. However, the vast majority of Neighborly system is just to receive uploaded documents. So we therefore recommend that you prepare all materials locally on your computer, share drive, and then upload and submit one time. You do not need to enter the application questions directly into the portal. The housing first certification and existing documents, the providers attest and sign, and that's correct. Those are existing documents, and we've included those a copy in the application, and those are actually going to be available in Neighborly to sign and certify electronically through that portal. And the explanation of YHDP is the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program. I'm sorry, I think that might be an acronym we skipped, and that is only accepting the renewal or replacement. So you have to be a recipient of youth homelessness demonstration programs to receive those funds this year. A new agency cannot apply to receive those dollars at this time.
Are there any other questions?
I don't see anything else, and I think we're doing pretty good for time since it's only 3 minutes past. Again, we'll post this FAQ on the website, and as questions come in through the inbox, we'll kind of update that document as we see necessary. I think that's it. Thank you so much for attending today's session. If you have friends or other providers within our network and they weren't here today, please let them know. They can find the webinar on the website. Also, make sure you sign up for the listserv. We're really excited to have a new communication platform. So we'll also blast that, this webinar once it's available online. To let people know that they can watch this information or look at the slides. Camille, did you have anything else?
That's it. Thanks for joining today, and we look forward to your further questions via email, and hope you all have a good rest of your day. Great. Bye.